I'm John Cowling, your host, and today we have Malcolm Smith, the 2022 Global President for ASIS International, who's here in the Middle East as a security professional. So welcome, Malcolm. So you've been in the region 7 years, and before that you were in Africa for many years. So your more recent times here in the Middle East, what are some of the challenges that you've seen and some of the solutions to your success?
Yes, thank you for having me. Yes, after spending in fact, I'm a South African born, so my role was heading up security for Africa. But then I also became the global director for security, and then I already started getting an idea of what's happening in the Middle East. And for the last 7 years, I'm based in Doha, and a few things that I've seen, particularly, from a security industry perspective. It's more about capacity building. There's still a key challenge of getting people to that level of security skill set that can couple the business with security. Because what I found is there's a sense of security that's kind of traditional approach to it, and it can be much costly to an organization, and that's why organizations don't really buy into security solutions. So my recommendation is, of course, focus on the people's aspect. The people aspect of security will get you far and make the business ends meet. We know, of course, process and technology is just enablers, because at the end of the day, people design and develop those, and people operate those. So we have to go back to the basics, and my view is the people aspect.
So when you talk about the people and capacity building, going back to the basics, what are some of the lessons that organizations here in the Middle East could learn from your experience?
You would recall last year when we had the Middle East conference in Dammam, one of the conversations that came out from the security leader executives, is human capital investment. So for me, the key learning is that you have to take your people to account for anything that you do, because the old saying of structure follows strategy, and structure normally supplemented with people. So that will give you, that valid contribution to your organization. And there's many ways that we can look at what we talk about human capital investment, not purely from a buzzword perspective, but also from a DE&I perspective, diversity, equity, and inclusion. What I found here, there's a lot of diversity, yes. Equity is a different story. Inclusion, another story to tell. So it's no use you have this diverse talent from across the globe, even in your space. Gender equity, we can discuss at a later stage, but not giving them a voice. Fairness, meaning equity and inclusion. That's where I found there's a lot of things need to be done in this space, that people really feel belonged and they are looked after and empowered to do their jobs.
When we talk about inclusion and how many of the regional countries have a program to upskill and promote nationals, what are some of the successes you've seen and some of the ways that we need further enhancement around getting this capacity building programs going?
There are a few successes. And I'm going to go back to Saudi's example last year. I sat on the Women in Security panel, and Saudi Aramco actually spoke about the successes of gender equity. So they have now a program for women in security where they now really grow them up to a level, and it is now on the increase. I've seen also, there are now more opportunities for women, and especially I'm going back to the security industry, that they get more of a voice. But we are still got a long way to go. There's still a way that we have to overcome this cultural barriers. It's one of the key things that we have to overcome to really give diversity, equity, and inclusion its fair share, because it's about business. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is not really only about ensuring that we use a diverse force, let them feel included in our decision making and so forth, but it's a business imperative. Studies have shown that businesses who embrace and embed DIE in their business way of doing business, they excel. Because if you really give somebody a voice, their diverse thought and so forth, innovation happens, right? Now, same in security. If we have a strong program in DE&I, you can innovate more. You can come up with new technologies to safeguard your organization. You can come with better ways of delivering your processes, more simplified, more efficient processes. Again, but it goes back to people.
So, with your background in South Africa and many years of experience there, what approaches did you find in South Africa around diversity and inclusion, and how does that compare with, I guess, the global approach? Is there things that we could be learning from your experiences that we could apply across the world?
Fair share of history when it comes to apartheid, segregation. So after that, when 1994, when Mandela took over, we brought up a program to really unite the nation. And part of it was affirmative action, right? Now, affirmative action, some other countries use a similar approach to redress the wrongs, because they were the privileged and the underprivileged. I'm from the underprivileged one. I haven't had the same education, the same opportunities, whereas my counter white folk had that. So that program was brought into the affirmative action. Also there what we call BEE, so there's black equity empowerment. So that was brought in a sense it was right at that time, but it's way overdue. In my view, it's way overdue. You cannot carry on for years on years and trying to redress the wrongs by a tick box exercise. That's not how it works, it's by merit. So for me, when I look at diversity, equity, inclusion, how we in South Africa has used it for its right purpose to redress the wrongs and coming to a point where we're on the same playing field, but then to take that DE&I to a next level of doing it for real, not for ticking a box exercise, but really. Yes, globally, that can be applied in a global sense where it's needed to redress the wrongs. If you want to redress and bring the underprivileged to a certain level where the privileged are, you can make use of a similar program what we've had in South Africa, but it doesn't mean it will cut in another culture, right? So everything at its place, as we know with global, we talk about there's certain global things that happens, but the local culture really wins the show. So it worked for us to a certain point because our culture allowed it to work like that. Trying to bring a similar program into a country where the cultures may not have a similar problem, you cannot just cut and paste it. You have to find a way of how do you bring a similar program into your DE&I program and make it.
So you mentioned a couple of key words that I want to touch upon, opportunity and merit, as in having the best person for the job. And then looking at the culture. So do you have any sort of thoughts on how we blend these together to develop an appropriate program that's effective and efficient?
At the end of the day, we have heard this word about culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? But culture is really the baseline of how things have to work and work around here. So if you think about opportunity, you think about the underprivileged or merit. Now this could be like, let's say for example, it's your value system. So if you take that as a value, at the end of the day, when people are embedding these values, it becomes the culture. So you can bring any type of value that people buy into. We need to recognize, for example, people's differences, okay? The underprivileged or the privileged, whatever it is, just by bringing that as a value, and we keep on doing that, it becomes our culture. This is the way we do things around here. This is the way we, make people feel belonged. Culture then makes that organization really become better at what they do, or a nation. If a nation has a certain cultural belief, it could either break them or it could ever build them. So they have to choose. And sometimes, they hold on to cultures that doesn't move you forward. So find the cultures that really makes a difference to you as an individual or a nation, or as a society, you know, as a nation as such. So there's a little bit of culture don't happen overnight. It's a long-term investment and a continuous, you know, work at it. But somebody has to drive it. From the top works normally well, because then you demonstrate what you would like people to behave in a certain way, and then everything. But at the end of the day, the people has to buy into it.
So, kind of, you know, to finish out this sort of short interview, people at the top drive it, and you're one of the guys, you're one of our leaders in the industry at the top. And if you were going to look back, if you travelled back in time 30 years ago and saw your younger self, and your younger self said, hey, Malcolm, what should I do differently? How should I make sure that I can get to the top faster? What advice would you give your younger self?
Wow. I would say, because if I look back where I come from, right? And I tell the story a few times and over, and I'm going to tell it again. So I grew up in Johannesburg, the south of Johannesburg. Now, Soweto was what I call southwestern area of Johannesburg. So, but our colored community is just a few kilometers away from that. But it was a gangster-infested environment. And of course, I don't believe in gangsterism, so I'm a single young man that started a small business at the Bioscope selling apples and peanuts. But the challenge is, I had to go from the one gangster territory to another territory, meaning in a rival territory, to get my goods to sell in my environment. So I learned early enough how to protect my business and how to protect myself, to go and get my product, get back into our environment, sell my goods, go back home safely without getting robbed. Now, that was at the age of 12 till about 18, so I paid for my school fees and so forth. So that actually brought me into the risk and security environment. But then it took me to the military, and so if I fast forward, I had this idea that I want to become a global head of security. But I knew it would take some time to get there. That's the reason why I actually educated myself. One of the things was to get a business, background behind me, so that I can couple the security with the business knowledge. And that helped me progress from being a country security manager for a large corporate to a regional security manager for a large corporate, and then to a global head of security for a multinational. But further to a volunteer side, that actually also helped me. That's where ASIS comes in. So I needed to also really build my skill set, such as collaborative leadership, servant leadership, inclusive leadership. These are the things that I built within the corporate, but not as how I've built it within ASIS. So these two now also gave me that global view of building the skill set that I needed to lead an organization like, for example, ASIS, but also be a leader of a multinational for its security program. And I must say, with ASIS, with working with about 34,000 people across the globe, being responsible to demonstrate a sense of belonging and inclusiveness through my Ubuntu conversation, 2,500 leaders like yourself is one of them, that you have to then, showcase that we really embrace D&I in our organization. And that's why our organization has D&I as part of our program, not today, it's been part of us. And for me, being part of the top leadership in the global director's seat, I had to demonstrate those. So I would say, it's not a fast forward move. It took me years to get there. But there's a way to get there. You have to set a clear path and a vision of where you want to add and contribute value.
Look, thank you for your time today, Malcolm. You've had a wonderful, inspiring journey to where you are today. And I'm sure you haven't finished in security today. I'm sure there's many more years to come. So thank you again for your time today, Malcolm. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. Thanks, John.